So in this video, I plan on taking another stab at some of the information that was given to us in that really, really long Michelle Sutton panel that Meghan did. Now, I had hoped to do it in the same format that I did with the previous Captain Kurt one, and that is just to choose one topic of conversation and focus on that. But in working through audio, trying to find that one topic of conversation, I realised that the Michelle Sutton panel is in fact even more all over the place than the Captain Kurt one. So instead I've taken a section and I thought we'll just ride the wave. So I will still break it up as much as I can so that your heads don't completely spin around and fall off, because it is hard to follow someone when they are changing topics every 20 seconds. So I will definitely still break it up, but it's not going to be any kind of linear narrative, because, well, you all know that's just not the way that Meghan works when she goes on other people's panels. And this Michelle Sutton one is a classic example of that. So let's launch in and listen to Meghan Cole trying to clarify a few things.
Okay, let me just clear up a whole bunch of things. I have my own theory of what happened to Kylie, and I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know. We don't know the exact facts. I know what happened, what Sam told me. Sam would have no reason to lie to me. I mean, she was a close friend of my daughter. My daughter and her were very, very close. My daughter is a straight A student and is going to Boise, Idaho for equine assistant therapy. She wants to work with special.
That is awesome.
I'm going to skip over her comment of having a theory, because we know, depending on what narrative she was trying to spin at the particular time. So at one stage, she was convinced that there had been some sort of accident and that the kids had covered it up. And then later down the track, it was all an accident. Kylie did it to herself. She does comment, I don't know the exact facts, which to me says that she does know some facts about the situation. And of course, she then goes on to talk about having spoken to Sammy. I know what happened. Okay, Meghan, so if you know what happened, how about you don't need to come and tell anyone on the internet, but you could actually go to law enforcement and speak up for Kylie. She says, well, I know what Sammy told me. So she's trying to backtrack there after saying that she knows what happened. She turns around and then changes it to, well, I know what Sammy told me, and that Sammy has no reason to lie to me. But, of course, we know that at another time, she has admitted that Sammy has lied to her. She's also admitted that she doesn't always agree with Sammy's decisions, and that Sammy isn't always the most responsible person. So, I'm not sure if there's a lot that we can take from this, because obviously, when it comes to Meghan, there's eternal contradictions. But I do find it interesting that she says, I know what happened, and then quickly changes it to, well, what Sam told me. So, does she know what happened? Okay, then she moves on, and she's trying to establish credibility for Sammy, trying to establish that Sammy wouldn't lie to her, Sammy wouldn't do something as atrocious as what people are speculating, because Sammy was best friends with her daughter, and her daughter was a straight A student who is now going to college at Boise and doing a most admirable thing of learning how to do like therapy through horses or something like that. Okay, but there's flawed logic in that, because just because someone hangs out with a good kid doesn't mean they're a good kid themselves. Good kids hang out with bad kids all the time. They're just very careful about telling their parents what those bad kids actually get up to. I think many of us can think back to our teens and think about some of our friends that our parents may not have approved of had they known exactly the sort of things that those friends got up to. And of course, there's also to consider the possibility that Daisy's not the angel that Meghan thinks she is. How often do good kids present as good kids at home and still get up to stuff when they're not at home? This is someone who's been at college for 2 years, living away from home, who hangs out with someone like Sammy Smith. And we've all seen what Sammy Smith's like. So, can we truly believe Meghan Cole when she paints her daughter as being this perfect angel? Question. Just wondering. So many kids, when they go off to college, use that time to experiment. They get up to things that they wouldn't want their parents to know that they got up to. So, how do we know that Daisy is so perfect? And I can appreciate every parent wants to believe that their child could do nothing wrong. But we actually have to live in the real world too, and appreciate that there are outside influences, and that teenagers can be influenced by the people around them, and that when given the independence of being a college student, they will experiment and get up to things that they wouldn't have previously done.
So when I say this, my daughter, like when my daughter met Sam, her parents actually, she met, and my daughter talks to her mom and dad all the time.
She slipped up there. She started saying, "We've talked," and then corrects herself with, "My daughter talks to Sammy's mum and dad all the time." Now, there have been instances also where she has slipped up in reference to Cindy and James. For example, when she spoke to Iked Mel, she said, "I spoke to Sammy, I spoke to her mum." So here she is on one hand claiming that she's never met Sammy's parents, she wouldn't know them if she tripped over them, she's never spoken to them, and yet she slips up here and she has previously mentioned to Iked Mel that she spoke to Sammy's mum straight after Kylie went missing. So I'd love to know why it is so important for us to believe that she's had no association with Sammy's parents, when to me it seems like she actually has. And sure, I can imagine that as young adults, it's possible that she may have not met Sammy's parents. But let's not forget that she's saying that Sammy has been part of their world for 6 years. In other words, they've known Sammy since she was 12. And at that time, Daisy wasn't able to drive Sammy around places. So, how did they, if they were such best friends, how did they connect outside of school? Someone had to drive a child to the other child's house. Also, she spoke about having taken Sammy camping with them previously. wouldn't you have to speak to the parents of the child that you're going to take camping? You're not going to take the child at their word that they're allowed to go camping with you. You're going to speak to their parents and make sure that it's all legit and everything's correct. Otherwise, you might just end up in jail for kidnapping.
I guess I didn't know that until recently. And I didn't even know her parents were lawyers. I'd never met her parents. I've only met Sam a handful of times, but I've talked to Sam through my daughter many times.
So this is an individual who claims that she doesn't lie. And yet, she's given us two stories that are poles apart. Here, she's saying she's only met Sam a handful of times, but she's spoken to her through her daughter. And yet, on other panels, she claims that she knows Sammy really, really well, that Sammy's been camping with their family, that she's been in her car. So, one of those stories is a lie. I would like to know what the actual truth of the situation is here. Is she not as familiar with Sammy as she later claimed, as she's saying here? Did she maybe later on claim that she knew Sammy really, really well to try and make her own story look better? Or is she trying to distance herself from Sammy here? Has she had time to think about it? Because we know that when she spoke to Ickard Mel, I believe that's when she mentioned Sammy having gone camping with her family. So perhaps now she's had time to think about what's happened, and she's starting to have doubts about Sammy's role in Kylie's disappearance. So she's trying to separate herself a little bit from Sammy. I don't know her that well. I will say that I find it highly unlikely that in a place like Truckee, where supposedly everybody knows everybody else, and with an individual like Meghan who knows everybody's business, that she didn't know what Sammy's parents did for a living. Particularly when you consider the overlap between law and real estate, which frequently occurs. And let's not forget also that Daisy's boyfriend at the time lived just down the road from Sammy. So I find it extremely unusual that she would not know that Sammy's mum was a lawyer and that her dad ran the private investigator business or whatever it was that they did. And I can't help wondering also, one of Sammy's older sisters is about the same age as Meghan. Did they go to school together? Because if they went to school together, then Meghan will have known her for 20 odd years, and she didn't know what her parents did. Because don't forget, apparently all the kids know each other, and they all know each other's families.
So when I talked to Daisy, my daughter, I said, is this something that Sam would do? And Sam, none of these kids had any inclination that something was going to go wrong. That's how you have to start out this thing.
Okay, note the way she worded that. Is this something that Sammy would do? Is what something that Sammy would do? She is referring to something specific that has happened. It sounds like she knows of something that has occurred, and she's questioning if Sammy was responsible. Is this something that Sammy would do? Now, if you're going with the narrative of Sammy having left the party and Kylie still being at the party, then why would you be asking, is this something that Sammy would do? It doesn't fit that narrative. To me, asking, is this something that Sammy would do, infers that something happened to Kylie. Somebody did something that impacted on Kylie. And none of these kids had any inclination that something was going to go wrong. To me, that also infers more than just a child vanishing from a party. To me, that implies that something was planned, something happened at the party, and something went terribly wrong. I could be misinterpreting, but to me it sounds like she's saying she's trying to excuse the kids for some sort of behaviour because they didn't expect it to go so terribly wrong. Of course, it's hard to assess stuff like this, like what Meghan is saying, when you do have additional knowledge and there are questions. But it honestly sounds to me like something did go wrong and the kids hadn't expected that to happen. As in, that something occurred as a consequence of actions of those kids at the party. Now, having touched on the topic of something having gone wrong at the party, you will note that she then quickly does a sidestep and starts talking about all the other things that were happening in the area that weekend, trying to deflect and suggest that it had nothing to do with the party and it must have been someone from a different area who came into the area because of the other events that were going on that same weekend.
Is that this was a graduation party. They had done it at the end of the year. There was a Hot August Nights that is a big thing in our town, a big thing in this area, and that's down in Reno, which is about 25 to 35 minutes away. And they have all kinds of old cars that go through there that are decked out and everything else. That ended out the same night that this party ended. So that's kind of why there was so much focus on, did she run away, or did she get out of town for a while? That's what really kind of everybody thought at the beginning. That's where, so when I talked to Iqmael in those conversations, I drove around that day. My son and I that was in the house drove around that day looking for Kylie's car. I drove up on streets that my car right over there I didn't think was going to make it at all. And I mean, it was just, I asked Sam a whole bunch of questions because I didn't really know how this was going to turn out. I really just thought that she was probably went down the wrong road, got a flat tire, and didn't have service. That was one avenue that we were going through. And when we say we don't have service, I could stand right here where I'm standing right now in my front yard and walk to the street and may not have service because of where we live. It's the trees. And Verizon, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Unfortunately, that goes on a lot in this town.
Okay, so people talk about word salad when it comes to Meghan. But to be honest, that was word vomit. There was absolutely nothing linear or logical about what she was just saying there. So she skipped around from that possibly Kylie took off because of Hot August Nights, which I'm not sure of the logic behind that. But I'm not sure if she was actually trying to get at the whole notion of Hot August Nights, bringing in extra people, and perhaps Kylie was abducted, because we know that narrative was put out at one point in time. So is it possible that she got going with her speech and she forgot what the narrative was meant to be? So then she spoke about Kylie running away or getting out of town because she forgot the narrative. But then in the same spiel, she starts talking about, well, she was searching for Kylie because she thought she might have had a flat tire somewhere and had no phone reception. So, which is it? Because she's basically given 3 different narratives. She's thrown in briefly that she spoke to Sammy, but she didn't really go anywhere with that. It's like she suddenly remembered that that was meant to be part of the narrative there somewhere, somehow, but she forgot how to connect it all in. So, if you made sense of that section, please leave a comment below and let me know what your take on all that was, because it seems like she's tried to piece together bits of narrative here, and it's all just kind of exploded in her face, and there was nothing fully formed about what she was trying to tell us here. And for those of you who are not familiar with my channel, just as a little aside, that background noise is my chihuahua snoring.
And if you talk to anybody, like they'll say, like it happened today where I had 3 people text me, and 4 hours later I'd already talked to them and texted them or whatever in a different way, and then all of a sudden I got in and I had 4 text messages that came through. So that's another reason why things don't always add up on time, maybe for some people, is that like I saw when they texted me at 1:30, but I didn't see it till 3:30. And so therefore it can be different in that aspect. I don't think that had anything to do with the time thing for Kylie though.
No, I think the ping was an actual ping. Like,
yes, I think it was.
Now that sounds like a whole heap of babble there, but it's actually quite interesting to listen to. Because to me, what she's doing there is sampling a new narrative. So she's aware at that point in time that the 12:36 phone call just doesn't fit the timeline, and that Sammy claiming this makes her look bad. So in bringing up the issue of reception, it appears as if it has suddenly occurred to her that this could be a good way of fixing the narrative to explain the 12:36. But she gets herself all jumbled up. She's talking about text messages that take several hours to come through, and then she's like, and maybe this is what happened with Kylie. But then you can tell that she realises straight away that that's not going to fit her attempt at fixing the narrative. So when Michelle corrects her and says, well, no, because it was a direct ping, and I seem to have forgot the fact that Sammy claimed it was a phone call. So she's basically sampled a new narrative, realised that it didn't work, and done an about turn pretty quickly within a very short space of time. So let's listen and see where she goes from here with this.
Okay, so when I talked to Sam had said that she had gotten a ride home from someone, when I say gotten a ride home, all of my kids, me included, for 20 years, for 20 years have done this. We have a really small town. When I was 20 years ago, when I graduated in 1997 from the exact same, or 25 years ago, I'm aging myself, 25 years ago, I had friends that did exactly the same thing that these kids did. They went out, they partied, they had, we had kegers. It's like a tailgate party. That's what it is.
Ever watches these things? I've told
what's that?
I said, God forbid if my mama ever watches my lives. I've told on myself too much the last 2 days.
Well, and I think that, and that's really what it is too, is that these kids, everybody says there's no pictures, there's no nothing, they did say to these kids that there wasn't going to be they weren't going to get in any trouble or anything else. However, with that being said, it's still how you may not be getting in trouble with the police or with anybody else, but you still have
your back.
You put the mark on your back, and it puts your family in a position where, like my dad, he's I'm the sandwich generation, which I just realized recently. I didn't even know that was a thing. But my dad is 75, and he's a real estate worker, and he's been here for 40 years and doing that for 40 years, and he sells high-end real estate. So if you look at it that way, and look at it from my perspective, my dad said, don't get involved. Like, just don't get involved. Your kids weren't there. Don't do it at all.
So that's something interesting that I think that we've really downplayed here. And I think it also ties in with the whole notion of Lindsay and Tony moving out of the area after all this happened. She's saying that the kids have immunity, but, they don't want to mess up college. But then she says, but she's pointing out that it's kind of important for them to keep quiet because it also comes back on their family. She's saying it puts a mark on your back. That's really, really interesting that she's saying that. So she's basically implying here that there is fallout from the community if you become involved. And she doubles down on that by saying that her father has told her not to become involved. Involved in what? If a child's just simply missing, what's the problem with becoming involved? Wouldn't everyone in the community want to be searching for that child? To me, the only reason that you would consider it to be putting a mark on your back to become involved, and that for that reason you would want to avoid becoming involved because it's also going to come back at your family, is because something bad did happen. I'd like to know what other people think on this, but I think it's quite significant here that she's talking about people having a mark on their back if they're involved and not wanting it to come back on their families. She is definitely saying here that it's an issue with the community. It's not just about the kids and their college placements. It's about how the family is going to be treated within the community if they become involved.
But if it was my kid, I want my child, anybody's child, I'm going to stand up for the underdog here because I don't think Sam did anything wrong. Did she make mistakes? Yes, without a doubt. But everybody keeps saying, why did she leave her at the party? Well, when you go out to these parties, I want to say it's parties, these kids all know each other. They've grown up together. These are like brothers and sisters from like every different generation. Like, they're neighbors, they're best friends, they've dated each other, they've got to know each other, and there is unfortunately a side of this town which it is wealthier and other side of the town which is not as wealthy, and it's a very big pendulum swing.
So on one hand she's saying Sammy didn't do anything wrong, but then she says she did make mistakes without a doubt. Note there, she's talking about mistakes plural, more than one mistake. She goes on to talk about Sammy leaving the party and leaving Kylie at the party. But then, in her own words, she's making that out as not being a mistake because she's essentially saying that all the kids know each other. So, leaving the party and leaving Kylie there was nothing because Kylie was with other friends, apparently. So, she's contradicting herself. Or she's talking about different mistakes that Sammy made. Personally, I do not believe that Sammy left the party at 12:25 as she claimed. Or if she did leave the party at 12:25 as she claimed, that something had already happened to Kylie before that time. Now, I find it interesting that when talking about how all the kids know each other, that she talks about the class difference that exists in Truckee. To me, that means that in her head, that is significant. That has some significance with regards to what happened to Kylie. Otherwise, why just randomly bring it up out of the blue? She doesn't go on to elaborate on it, and I suspect that maybe she realised that she probably shouldn't elaborate on it because she was heading into dangerous territory. I'd like to know what people think about that. Now, just to finish this off, I'm going to play a classic Meghan quote at the end, which of course calls into question the reasoning for her jumping in and hopping in on all these lives. I think it's more than just her trying to defend someone, but it's also about her loving the attention.
Last night we got spammed, and it was my first live, and I wasn't expecting my channel to blow up as fast as it has. Like, I just started last week.
Well, I'm gonna make your channel go from 0 to 60.
Thanks for listening. If you like my content and want to see more, please hit the subscribe button. Also, please hit the like button and leave a comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts on all of this.
I begin to wonder